In the heart of eastern Nigeria, where the sun kissed the earth with golden warmth, lay the village of Idum, a place where stories were woven into the very fabric of life. Idum was no ordinary village. It was a tapestry of lush palm groves, winding streams, and mud brick homes that glowed under the evening sky. The air carried the scent of roasted yam and the rhythm of talking drums, a reminder of a people bound by tradition and pride. At the center of it all stood the palace of King Eze, a wise ruler whose laughter echoed like thunder, and whose love for his people was as deep as the roots of the ancient Iroko tree. In this village, no couple was more celebrated than Chika and Ifeoma Nwosu. Chika, with his broad shoulders and eyes that sparkled like polished obsidian, was a master carver whose hands breathed life into wood. Ifeoma, radiant as the dawn, had a beauty that stopped hearts. Her skin gleamed like dark honey, and her smile could coax flowers to bloom. Together, they were Idume's pride, the village's own sun and moon. The elders whispered that their children would surely inherit their grace, destined to be as breathtaking as their parents. And so it was that Ifeoma bore 3 daughters, each more beautiful than the last. Ada, the eldest, had eyes that shimmered like stars, drawing suitors from distant lands. Ngozi, the second, moved with the grace of a gazelle, her laughter a melody that lingered in the air. Ezan, the youngest of the 3, was a vision of elegance, her braided hair adorned with cowrie shells that clinked softly as she walked. The village rejoiced at their birth, and mothers brought gifts of cloth and beads, hoping one day their sons might win the hearts of these radiant girls. "Ifeoma's womb is blessed," the women said, their voices thick with envy and awe. "Her children will light up Idume like flames." But fate, as it often does, had other plans. When Ifeoma bore her 4th child, the joy that had once filled the Nwosu household turned to ash. The baby, named Amara, was nothing like her sisters. She was small, her features sharp and unfamiliar, her skin marked with patches that seemed to defy the sun's embrace. Ifeoma, expecting another jewel to crown her legacy, felt her heart shatter. She held the child in trembling hands, her eyes brimming with tears, not of love, but of horror. "What is this?" she whispered, her voice breaking like brittle clay. The midwives exchanged uneasy glances, their silence heavier than words. Chika, summoned from his workshop, stood frozen at the sight of his daughter. His face, once warm with pride, twisted into something cold and distant. "This is not my child," he declared, his voice a low growl. "This is an omen, a curse." Without another word, he turned and left, his footsteps fading into the night. The village buzzed with whispers. Some called Amara a spirit, others a mistake. Ifeoma, alone with her shame, clutched the child to her chest, not out of affection, but because she had no choice. Years passed, and Amara grew in the shadows of her sister's brilliance. While Ada, Ngozi, and Ezine danced at festivals, their beauty drawing gasps and proposals, Amara was hidden away. Ifeoma forbade her from leaving the house, fearing the village's cruel tongues. "Stay inside," she snapped whenever Amara lingered near the door. "Do you want to shame us all?" The words cut deeper than any blade, and Amara learned to shrink, to make herself small in a world that refused to see her. Yet even in her confinement, Amara's spirit flickered like a stubborn flame. She was no beauty, not in the way Idume measured it. Her eyes were too wide, her nose too broad, her frame too frail. But there was something in her, a quiet strength that refused to break. At night, when the house was still, she would sit by the window, gazing at the stars, and whisper to herself, "One day, I will be enough." The words were her secret, her shield against a mother who saw her as a burden, and sisters who treated her like a ghost. Ifeoma's heart, once soft, had hardened over time. She poured her love into Ada, Ngozi, and Ezine, dressing them in vibrant Ankara fabrics and teaching them to hold their heads high. To Amara, she gave only chores, sweeping the compound, scrubbing pots, fetching water until her hands grew rough. "You're lucky I keep you at all," Ifeoma would say, her eyes cold as stone. "What did I do to deserve you?" Amara, too young to understand the weight of those words, would bow her head and work in silence, her heart aching for a love she'd never known. The village, too, had its role in Amara's pain. Children whispered as they passed the Nwosu compound, calling her the strange one, or Ifeoma's mistake. Elders shook their heads, pitying Ifeoma for her burden. And so, Amara became a shadow. Unseen and unloved, her existence a secret Idume preferred to forget. But deep within her, a spark waited. A spark that would one day set the village ablaze with wonder. The village of Idume woke each dawn to a chorus of life. Women in bright Ankara wrappers hurried to the market, their voices rising over the clatter of calabashes, bargaining for okra and smoked fish. Men gathered under the shade of mango trees, their laughter mingling with the distant bleat of goats. The fields stretched green and gold, kissed by the sun, while children chased one another through the dust, their bare feet drumming a rhythm only youth could know. At night, the stars blanketed the sky, so close it seemed you could pluck one down and hold its light in your palm. Idume was a place of beauty, of stories told by firelight, but for Amara Nwosu, it was a cage woven with whispers and scorn. At 17, Amara's days were a litany of labor. She rose before the roosters, her hands calloused from scrubbing floors and pounding yam. The Nwosu compound, with its clay walls and thatched roof, was her world. A world ruled by her mother, Ifeoma, whose beauty had once been Idume's pride, but now carried the weight of bitterness. Ifeoma's love was reserved for her 3 elder daughters, Ada, Ngozi, and Ezine, whose laughter filled the house like music. Amara was the discord, the note that jarred the melody. That morning, as Amara knelt in the courtyard, grinding maize under the watchful eye of the rising sun, her thoughts drifted to the forest beyond the village. The forest of Idume was a place of mystery, its ancient trees whispering tales of spirits and forgotten gods. She'd slipped there once, when the house was empty, and found solace beneath a towering iroko, its branches cradling her like a mother's arms. There, she could sing, softly at first, then bolder, her voice weaving through the leaves like a breeze. The songs were old, passed down from her grandmother, tales of lovers parted by rivers, of hearts that burned brighter than the Harmattan fires. "Amara!" Ngozi's voice cut through her reverie, sharp as a thorn. She stood in the doorway, her Ankara dress clinging to her curves, her braids adorned with beads that caught the light. "Why are you so slow? Mama wants the maize done before the market opens." Amara lowered her eyes, her fingers tightening around the grinding stone. "I'm almost finished," she murmured, her voice barely above a whisper. Ngozi smirked, tossing her head. "You'd better be. I don't want to be late because of you." She sauntered off, her laughter trailing like a taunt. Amara's heart sank, but she kept grinding, the rhythm steadying her. She wondered what it would be like to walk freely, to wear a dress that shimmered like Ngozi's, to feel eyes on her not with pity but with wonder. In her dreams, There was someone, a man perhaps, with a voice like the river's song, who would see her not as Idume saw her, but as a flame hidden in ash. The thought warmed her, a secret she tucked deep within, where her mother's words couldn't reach. Inside the house, Ifeoma prepared for the market, her movements precise but heavy with unspoken grief. She glanced at Amara through the window, her lips tightening. Once, she'd dreamed of a daughter who would mirror her beauty, who would carry her name with pride. Amara was a wound that never healed, a reminder of Chika's betrayal. "If only you were different," she whispered, her fingers clutching a string of cowrie shells. But different how? Even Ifeoma didn't know. The day wore on, and Amara's chores multiplied, fetching water, sweeping the veranda, mending Ada's torn wrapper. By afternoon, the house was quiet, her sisters gone to flaunt their beauty at the market. Ifeoma too had left, her parting words a warning. "Don't you dare leave this compound." But the forest called to Amara, its whispers louder than her fear. She slipped through the back gate, her heart pounding, and ran until the trees closed around her like a lover's embrace. Beneath the Iroko tree, Amara sank to her knees, the earth cool against her skin. The forest was alive. Crickets hummed, leaves rustled, and a distant stream sang its own melody. She closed her eyes and let her voice rise, a song of longing that seemed to dance with the wind. "Oh, river of my heart, carry me to where love waits," she sang, her words trembling with a hope she barely dared to feel. For a moment, she was free, her soul soaring beyond Idume's judgment. But freedom was fleeting. A rustle broke her trance, and Amara's eyes snapped open to see a group of children staring from the bushes, their faces pale with fear. "It's her," one whispered, a girl no older than 10. "The strange one! She's a spirit!" Before Amara could speak, they fled, their screams echoing through the trees. Panic seized her. She scrambled to her feet, her heart hammering as she raced back to the compound. But the damage was done. By evening, the village buzzed with rumors. Amara, the Nwosu's hidden shame, was no girl but a creature of the forest, haunting Idume with her eerie songs. The whispers reached Ifeoma as she returned from the market, her basket heavy with unsold goods and her heart heavier still. "You!" Ifeoma's voice thundered as she stormed into the house, her eyes blazing. Amara stood in the corner, her hands clasped to keep them from shaking. "What did I tell you about leaving this house? Now they're calling you a witch, a demon. Do you know what this does to me?" "Mama, I didn't mean—" Amara began, but Ifeoma cut her off. "Enough!" she shouted, her voice cracking like dry wood. "You bring me nothing but shame. Every day I bear the weight of you. And now this?" She paced, her wrapper swishing, her breath ragged. "I should never have kept you." The words pierced Amara like a blade, deeper than any before. She wanted to scream, to ask why her mother hated her so, but all she could do was whisper, "I'm sorry, Nine. I only wanted to breathe." Ifeoma froze, her eyes flickering with something. Guilt, perhaps, or sorrow, but it vanished as quickly as it came. "Breathing isn't for you," she said coldly. "Not when you ruin us all." She turned away, but Amara saw the tremble in her hands, the crack in her armor. That night, as the village slept under a moon as bright as polished silver, Ifeoma made a decision. She couldn't bear the whispers, the pitying glances, the weight of a daughter who didn't belong. At midnight, she shook Amara awake, her voice unnaturally calm. "Get up," she said. "I need you to come with me. A friend is sick, and she needs our help." Amara blinked, confusion clouding her sleep-heavy eyes. Ifeoma had never spoken to her so gently, not in years. A spark of hope flared in her chest. Perhaps her mother regretted her words. Perhaps this was a chance to mend what was broken. "Yes, Mama," she said, pulling on her faded wrapper and following Ifeoma into the night. The forest of Idume was different under moonlight, its shadows deeper, its sounds sharper. Owls hooted, and unseen creatures skittered through the underbrush. Amara clung to her mother's side, her bare feet stumbling over roots and stones. They crossed a stream, its water cold against her ankles, and climbed a hill where the trees grew sparse. "Mama, where are we going?" she asked, her voice small against the night's vastness. "Not far," Ifeoma replied, her tone clipped. But her pace quickened, and Amara struggled to keep up, her breath coming in gasps. The forest seemed to close in, its branches clawing at her like fingers. Fear gnawed at her, but she pushed it down, clinging to the hope that her mother needed her. At last, they stopped in a clearing, where a single atamfa tree stood, its red flowers glowing like embers in the moonlight. Ifeoma turned to Amara, her face a mask of resolve. "This is far enough," she said, her voice steady but hollow. Amara frowned, her heart racing. "Mama, where's your friend?" Ifeoma's eyes glistened, but not with tears. Something harder, colder. "There is no friend," she said. "There's only you, Amara, and the shame you've brought me since the day you were born." She stepped closer, her words slicing through the silence. "I prayed you'd never come, that you'd fade before you drew breath. But you didn't. You stayed, and every day, you've dragged me deeper into disgrace." Amara's knees buckled, her breath catching in her throat. Please," she whispered, reaching out. "I'll be better. I'll stay hidden. Don't say these things." But Ifeoma shook her head, her voice rising like a storm. "No more hiding. I can't bear it. Their whispers, their pity. You're not my daughter, not like Ada or Ngozi or Ezine. You're a curse, and I'm done carrying you." She turned, her wrapper catching the moonlight as she started to walk away. "Mama!" Amara's cry tore through the forest, raw and desperate. She stumbled after Ifeoma, her hands grasping at air. "Don't leave me! I'm your daughter! I love you!" But Ifeoma didn't look back, her figure swallowed by the shadows until she was gone. Amara sank to the ground, her sobs shaking her frail frame. The forest pressed in, its sounds a chorus of menace, crickets shrieking, branches snapping, the distant howl of something wild. She curled against the atamfa tree, its bark rough against her cheek, and clutched her chest as if to hold her breaking heart together. "What did I do?" she whispered, her voice lost in the night. "Why am I never enough?" Alone, abandoned, Amara felt the weight of her life crash down. Every harsh word, every averted glance, every dream she'd buried. Yet, even in her despair, a spark flickered. She lifted her eyes to the moon, its light soft as a lover's touch, and began to sing. The song was slow, mournful, a lament for a girl who'd lost everything but her voice. "Oh, stars above, see my tears," she sang, her words trembling. "Guide me to where I belong." The forest listened, its silence deepening, as if holding its breath. And somewhere, in the heart of the darkness, a presence stirred. A promise that Amara's song would not go unheard. The forest of Idume was a world unto itself, a realm where shadows danced with moonlight, and every leaf seemed to whisper secrets older than time. Under the canopy of ancient iroko trees, the air was thick with the scent of damp earth and blooming atamfa flowers, their red petals glowing faintly in the dark like embers of a forgotten fire. A narrow stream wound through the undergrowth, its waters catching the stars' reflection, while unseen creatures stirred, crickets weaving their endless song, owls calling to the night. To the people of Adume, this was a place of mystery, where spirits lingered and the brave dared not tread after dusk. But for Amara Nwosu, abandoned beneath the Atamfa tree, it was now her only home and her prison. Her sobs had faded to a hollow ache, her tears spent on the unforgiving earth. Amara curled against the tree's rough bark, her arms wrapped around herself as if to hold her shattering heart together. The forest's sounds pressed in, sharp, unfamiliar, a reminder that she was alone, unwanted, cast out like chaff from the harvest. Ifeoma's words echoed in her mind, each one a blade. "You're a curse. I'm done carrying you." She pressed her face into her knees, her breath ragged. "What did I do?" she whispered, her voice breaking. "Why am I never enough?" The moon hung low, its silver light spilling through the branches, bathing Amara in a glow that felt almost tender. She lifted her eyes to the sky, searching the stars as she always had, seeking a sign that she wasn't invisible. "Ancestors, see me," she murmured, her words half prayer, half plea. "If I must die here, let it be quick. But if I'm meant to live, show me why." Her voice trembled, but something within her refused to break. A spark, fragile but fierce, that had carried her through years of scorn. Exhausted, she began to sing, as she always did when the world grew too heavy. The melody was an old one, taught by her grandmother long before Ifeoma's love turned cold. A song of a girl who wandered the heavens, gathering stars to light her way home. "Oh, sky of my soul, hold me close," Amara sang, her voice soft but steady, weaving through the forest like a thread of hope. The notes rose and fell, carrying her pain, her longing, her refusal to fade. The forest seemed to listen, its noises softening, as if honoring her grief. A rustle broke the spell, faint but deliberate. Amara froze, her heart leaping to her throat. She clutched the tree, her eyes darting through the shadows. "Who's there?" she called, her voice barely a whisper. The forest answered with silence. But then, a figure emerged, stepping into the moonlight. She was an old woman, her back bent like a river reed, her wrapper faded but adorned with intricate patterns that shimmered faintly, as if woven with starlight. Her face was a map of wrinkles, each line telling a story, but her eyes, deep and knowing, held a warmth that made Amara's fear falter. A basket of herbs hung from her arm, and her steps were silent, as if the earth itself cradled her feet. "Don't be afraid, my child," the woman said, her voice low and soothing, like the hum of a distant lullaby. "I mean you no harm. I was gathering leaves by the stream when I heard your song. Why are you here, alone in the heart of the forest?" Amara's throat tightened, tears welling anew. She wanted to run, to hide, but something in the woman's gaze held her fast, a kindness she hadn't felt since her grandmother's embrace. I have nowhere else," she stammered. "My mother, she left me here. She said I'm a curse." The woman's eyes softened, a flicker of sorrow crossing her face. She knelt before Amara, her hands gentle as she brushed a tear from her cheek. "A curse? No, child. You are no curse. You are a song, a light the world has yet to see." She smiled, and it was as if the moon itself had warmed the night. "Come with me. No one should be alone in this place. Amara hesitated, her heart torn between fear and longing. But the woman's hand, rough yet tender, beckoned her, and she rose, her legs trembling. They walked in silence, the forest parting before them, until they reached a small hut hidden among the trees. Its walls were mud and thatch, adorned with carved wooden figures, ancestors perhaps, their eyes watching over the hearth. Inside, a fire crackled, filling the air with the scent of dried herbs and roasted corn. A mat lay in the corner, covered with a woven blanket that shimmered faintly, like the woman's wrapper. "Sit, child," the woman said, gesturing to a stool by the fire. "My name is Neka. This is my home, and tonight it is yours." Amara obeyed, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Neka moved with quiet grace, grinding herbs and stirring a pot of vegetable stew that bubbled over the flames. She handed Amara a calabash of water, her touch steadying the girl's shaking fingers. "Drink," she said softly, "and tell me your story, if you wish." The words spilled from Amara like a river breaking free. She spoke of Ifeoma's coldness, her sister's cruelty, the village that saw her as a shadow. She spoke of the night her father left, of the years spent hiding, of the forest that had become her only friend. And she spoke of the betrayal, her voice breaking as she recounted Ifeoma's final words. Neka listened, her eyes never leaving Amara's, her silence a balm to the girl's wounds. When Amara finished, Neka sighed, her gaze distant. "You are not alone in your pain," she said. "Long ago, I too was cast out. I was married once, full of dreams, but I could not bear children. The village called me barren, a failure. When my husband took another wife and her child died, they blamed me, called me a witch. They banished me to this forest, believing it cursed. But I found a home here, and the spirits of Idume have been my kin." Amara's eyes widened, her heart aching for the woman before her. "How do you bear it?" she whispered. "Being so alone?" Neka smiled, a glimmer of mischief in her eyes. "Alone? No, child. The forest is never silent. It sings, just as you do. And you are not meant to fade here. There is a reason you've come to me." She leaned closer, her voice dropping to a reverent hush. "Your mother wronged someone long ago when she carried you in her womb. At the market, she took what wasn't hers, a piece of meat, small but precious, and let another woman bear the blame. That woman, shamed and beaten, cursed her thief, and the curse took root in you. It shaped your form, your path, but it does not define you." Amara's breath caught, her mind reeling. "A curse?" she whispered. "Is that why I'm like this?" Neka nodded, her hand resting on Amara's. "But curses can be broken, my child. The spirits have led you to me, and I will help you find your light." Over the next days, Neka prepared Amara for a ritual, her movements deliberate and sacred. She taught her to fast, to cleanse her spirit with prayers whispered under the stars. Each dawn, they walked to a hidden stream, its waters clear as crystal, where Amara knelt and offered her tears to the ancestors. Neka burned herbs, bitter leaves and sacred bark, filling the air with a fragrance that felt alive, like the breath of the forest itself. "You are not erasing who you are," Neka said, her voice firm. "You are uncovering it." On the 7th day, as twilight painted the sky in hues of violet and gold, Neka led Amara to the stream's heart, where the water glowed with an otherworldly light. Atamfa petals floated on its surface, shimmering like tiny flames. "Step into the river," Neka instructed, her eyes alight with certainty. "Let it wash away what was never yours." Amara trembled, her heart pounding with fear and hope. She shed her wrapper, her skin prickling in the cool air, and stepped into the water. It enveloped her, warm and alive, as if embracing her very soul. She closed her eyes, and a song rose unbidden, a prayer, a plea, a promise. The forest hummed in response, the wind carrying voices that seemed to call her name. Light pulsed beneath her eyelids, bright and fierce, and when she opened her eyes, she felt new. She stepped from the stream, water cascading from her body, and gasped. Her skin, once patchy and dull, now gleamed like polished ebony, smooth and radiant. Her features, once sharp and uneven, had softened into a beauty that felt both foreign and familiar. She touched her face, her fingers trembling, and met Neka's gaze. "You are as you were always meant to be," Neka said, her voice thick with pride. "A star, Amara, shining for all to see." Tears streamed down Amara's cheeks, but they were tears of joy, of release. She fell into Neka's arms, clinging to her as she had never clung to Ifeoma. "Ne," she whispered, the word of vow. "Thank you." Neka held her tightly, her laughter soft as a lullaby. "This is only the beginning, my child. Your heart is your true beauty, and it will lead you home." That night, Amara stood by the stream, her reflection shimmering in the moonlight. She was beautiful, yes, but it was the strength within her, the strength Neka had helped her find, that made her feel alive. She sang again, a new song of hope, its notes soaring through the forest like wings. "Oh, river of my dreams, guide me to my dawn," she sang, her voice clear and bold. Neka watched from the hut, her smile tinged with knowing. The spirits had spoken, and Amara's path was unfolding. Somewhere beyond the trees, a prince wandered, his own heart seeking a light only she could offer. In the heart of Idum, where the earth pulsed with the rhythm of its people, the palace of King Ise stood as a beacon of tradition and pride. Its walls, crafted from red clay, gleamed under the sun, etched with carvings of ancestors who watched over the land with silent wisdom. The courtyard bloomed with muong flowers, their yellow petals a carpet for the feet of nobles, while the air carried the faint scent of palm wine and roasted goat, offerings to the spirits before every council meeting. Within the great hall, a throne of polished ebony rose, draped in kente cloth, its presence commanding reverence. Here, Eze ruled, not with an iron fist, but with a heart heavy with love for Idume and fear for its future. Eze was old now, his hair silvered like the moonlight, his shoulders stooped under the weight of 60 winters. His eyes, once sharp as a hawk's, had softened with time, but they still burned with a father's hope. His twin sons, Obi and Kelechi, were the pride of his blood, yet they were also his greatest dilemma. Born in the chaos of a stormy night, their arrival had been a blur. No one could say which had drawn breath first, and tradition demanded a single heir. The question gnawed at Ise, a splinter in his soul, as he sat before his council, their faces etched with expectation. "My king," said Elder Okonkwo, his voice gravelly with age, "the people grow restless. Idume needs a prince to carry your legacy. Will it be Obi, the heart of the village, or Kelechi, the fire of ambition?" Ise's fingers tightened around his staff, carved with the likeness of a leopard, symbol of his line. He loved both sons fiercely, but their paths diverged like rivers from a single source. Obi, with his easy smile and gentle hands, tended the palace gardens and played with the children of Idume, his laughter a balm to their cares. Kelechi, sharp-eyed and restless, studied the ways of power, his mind always on the throne that gleamed in his dreams. Eze had watched them grow, hoping the ancestors would guide him. But the spirits remained silent. "I will not choose blindly," Eze said, his voice steady but laced with weariness. "The ancestors must speak. Tonight, we summon Omenuko, the seer whose eyes pierce the veil of time." The council murmured assent, and as dusk fell, Idume stirred with anticipation. The village square glowed with torchlight, the talking drums beating a summons that echoed through the palm groves. Women in shimmering Jeel head wraps gathered, their voices rising in song, while men poured libations of palm wine to honor Chi, the personal spirit that guided every soul. Eze stood before the shrine of the ancestors, his Agbada robe flowing like a river of indigo, and raised his hands to the sky. "Great ones, show us the path," he prayed, his heart heavy with the weight of a father and a king. From the shadows came Omenuko, the seer of Idume, his presence like a storm held in check. His robes were plain, patched with earth, but his eyes burned with a light that seemed to see beyond flesh. A staff of twisted wood rested in his hand, crowned with a cowrie shell that gleamed like a third eye. The crowd fell silent, their breaths held, as he stepped into the circle of torches. "Eze, son of Idum," Omenuko intoned, his voice deep and resonant, as if drawn from the earth itself. "The ancestors have heard your plea. The throne demands a heart true to Idume, one whose chi shines with honor. Your sons must prove themselves." Ize's pulse quickened, hope mingling with dread. "How, wise one?" he asked. "What must they do?" Omenuko raised his staff, and the air seemed to hum, the stars above sharpening in their glow. "In the forest of Idume lies the Jade Circle, a relic of our forefathers, hidden by the spirits. Let Obi and Kelechi seek it. The one who finds it, led by the light of Chi, will wear the crown. They have 7 days." A gasp rippled through the crowd, for the forest was no mere wilderness. It was a place of trials, where the brave faltered and the pure were tested. Eze nodded, his jaw tight. "So be it," he said. "Prepare the ritual. My sons will face their destiny." Before dawn, Obi and Kelechi stood before the shrine, their bodies cleansed with water and bitter herbs, their wrists bound with cords of palm fiber to honor the ancestors. Obi's eyes were calm, reflecting the first light, but his heart was heavy, not for the throne, but for Idume's peace. He thought of his mother, long gone, who had taught him to listen to the wind, to find joy in small things. "If I am to rule," he thought, "let it be with a heart that loves." In his quiet moments, he dreamed of a companion, not a queen to adorn his side, but a soul who would share the moonlight with him, whose laughter would echo his own. Kelechi, beside him, stood tall, his chest puffed with certainty. His agbada was pristine, embroidered with gold, a prince already crowned in his mind. "I was born for this," he muttered, his voice low but fierce. "The throne is mine, not his." He glanced at Obi, his twin, his rival, and felt a pang of envy for the ease with which Obi won hearts. Kelechi wanted more. He wanted to be remembered, to carve his name into Idume's story. As the drums beat and the elders chanted, the brothers stepped into the forest, their paths diverging under the watchful eyes of the trees. The forest of Idume was a labyrinth of shadow and light, its air thick with the scent of moss and hidden blooms. Squirrel monkeys chattered overhead, and mist curled like spirits around the roots of ancient Irokos. Atamfa flowers glowed faintly, their petals whispering of secrets only the pure could hear. Kalichi moved with purpose, his machete hacking through vines, his eyes scanning for any sign of the jade circle. He cared nothing for the forest's beauty, its streams, its bird song, its quiet magic. When a faint cry echoed through the trees, a woman's voice perhaps, calling for help, he paused, his brow furrowing. "A trick," he muttered, shaking his head. "Nothing will stop me." He pressed on, his heart blind to all but his goal, unaware that the light of Chi did not follow. Obi, meanwhile, walked with a softer tread, his hands brushing the leaves as if greeting old friends. He loved Idume, not its throne, but its soul, its people, its earth. The forest felt alive to him, its whispers stirring memories of his mother's stories. When the same cry reached his ears, his steps faltered. His instinct was to run toward it, to help, but doubt held him back. Is this part of the test? He wondered, his heart torn. He took a step forward, then stopped, the cry fading into silence. A faint glow flickered ahead, a pulse of light, brief but warm, like a star waking in the dusk. He followed it, his breath catching, sensing that his Chai was guiding him somewhere unknown, far from the brothers' paths, deep in the forest's heart. Amara stood by Neka's hut, her hands busy weaving a basket of palm fronds. The days since her transformation had been a dream. Her skin now glowed like dark amber, her eyes bright with a fire she'd never known. Yet her heart still carried the weight of Ifeoma's betrayal, a bruise that ached with every beat. Neka, her savior, her Ne, watched her with quiet pride, her own secrets hidden beneath a gentle smile. "Sing for me, child," Neka said, her voice soft as she stirred a pot of bitter leaf stew. "The forest loves your voice." Amara hesitated, then let her song rise, a melody of hope, of a girl reborn under the stars. "O river of my dawn, carry me to light," she sang, her notes soaring through the trees, pure and unafraid. The forest seemed to answer, its leaves rustling in harmony, and for a moment Amara felt whole, as if her pain had been but a shadow passing over the moon. Unseen, a faint glow lingered near the stream, drawn by her voice, a light that pulsed in time with another, far off, where a prince wandered, his heart open to the call of destiny. The forest of Idume pulsed with secrets, its ancient trees standing sentinel over truths hidden in shadow. Moonlight wove through the branches, casting silver threads across the earth, where Atamfa flowers glowed like embers scattered by a careless god. A faint mist curled around the roots of Iroko trees, carrying whispers, perhaps of ancestors, perhaps of spirits, who watched the fates of men unfold. The air was heavy with the scent of damp moss and wild herbs, and the distant murmur of a stream sang a lullaby to the night. For Obi Okoye, this forest was no longer just a trial. It was a crucible where his heart would be tested, broken, and reborn. Deep within the labyrinth of green, Obi knelt beside a moss-covered stone, his breath catching as his fingers brushed a glint of jade. The circle was small, no larger than a child's wrist, its surface smooth as water, etched with symbols that seemed to hum with life. A soft light pulsed from it, warm and steady, the light of Chai that had guided him through days of searching. He'd followed it past streams and thorns, driven not by ambition, but by a quiet resolve to honor Idum. The cry he'd heard, the woman's plea, faint but piercing, had stirred him, though he'd found no one. Yet the light had grown brighter, as if his willingness to help had been the key. "It's you," Obi whispered, lifting the jade circle to the moonlight. Its glow bathed his face, reflecting in his eyes. Eyes that held no hunger for power, only gratitude. He thought of his father, Ise, whose weary shoulders carried Idume's hopes, and of his mother, whose stories had taught him to seek goodness above glory. "For you," he murmured, tucking the circle into his agbada, "and for our people." Unseen, Kelechi watched from the shadows, his heart a storm of envy and rage. He'd searched tirelessly, hacking through vines, cursing the forest's tricks, but the light of Chi had eluded him. Now, seeing Obi, his twin, his mirror, his rival, clutch the prize, something snapped within him. Kelechi's hands tightened around the branch he held, his knuckles pale against the wood. "Why you?" he hissed under his breath. "You, who never wanted it? You who has everything, love, trust, Idum's heart?" Obi rose, unaware of the eyes boring into him, and turned toward the path home. His steps were light, his mind already on his father's smile, on the peace this circle would bring. But Kelechi moved swiftly, silent as a leopard, his heart drowning in bitterness. He raised the branch, its weight heavy with intent, and struck. The blow landed with a sickening crack, catching Obi at the base of his skull. He stumbled, the world spinning, the jade circle slipping from his grasp. "Kelechi?" he gasped, turning to meet his brother's eyes that burned with a fury he'd never seen. Pain seared through him, and he reached out, not to fight, but to understand. "Brother, why?" Another strike, harder, and Obi fell, his body crumpling to the forest floor. Blood trickled from his temple, dark against his skin, as the light in his eyes flickered. Kelechi stood over him, his chest heaving, the branch trembling in his hands. "You don't deserve this," he spat, his voice thick with venom. "You never did. The throne is mine. Mine." He snatched the jade circle, its glow dimming in his grasp, and fled, leaving Obi to the mercy of the night. The forest seemed to hold its breath, its silence a shroud over the fallen prince. Hours passed, the moon climbing higher, until a faint sound broke the stillness. A girl's voice, soft and clear, weaving a song through the trees. Amara Nwosu walked along the stream, a basket of herbs balanced on her hip, her wrapper swaying with each step. Since Nneka had lifted her curse, her beauty had blossomed like a dawn flower. Her skin gleamed like polished ebony, her eyes sparkled with a fire that warmed the dark. Yet her heart still carried the ache of Ifeoma's rejection. A wound only Nneka's kindness had begun to heal. She sang as she walked, a melody of love and loss, her voice a thread connecting her to the stars. "O wind of my dreams, carry me to home," she sang, her notes dancing with the cricket's hum. But a low moan stopped her, sharp and pained, cutting through her song. She froze, her basket slipping to the ground, her heart pounding. "Who's there?" she called, her voice trembling. No answer came. Only another moan. Weaker now. Amara's fear urged her to run, but something stronger, something Nneka had nurtured, held her fast. She followed the sound, pushing through ferns and thorns until she saw him. A man, sprawled beneath an iroko, his agbada torn, his face streaked with blood. His chest rose faintly, each breath a struggle, and Amara's breath caught at the sight. He was beautiful, even in pain, his features strong, his eyes half open, flickering with a light that refused to fade. "Oh, ancestors," she whispered, kneeling beside him. Her hands hovered, unsure, then pressed against his wound, warm and wet beneath her fingers. "Hold on, please." She called for Neka, her voice sharp with urgency, and together they carried him to the hut, his weight heavy but precious in their arms. Inside, the fire cast a golden glow over Neka's hut, its walls alive with the scent of bitter leaves and sacred oils. Amara laid the man, Obi, though she didn't know his name, on a mat, her hands trembling as she cleaned his wounds. Neka moved with quiet purpose, grinding herbs into a paste, her eyes narrowing as she studied him. "He's strong," she said, her voice low. "The forest brought him to us for a reason, Amara. Tend to him." Amara nodded, her heart a storm of fear and wonder. She dipped a cloth in water from the sacred stream, dabbing at Obi's brow, her touch gentle as a whisper. His face, bruised but proud, stirred something in her, a memory of the stranger she'd dreamed of, the one who would see her as she truly was. She began to sing, soft and unthinking, the same song she'd sung by the stream. "Oh, wind of my dreams, carry me to home," she murmured, her voice a lifeline in the dark. Obi stirred, his eyelids fluttering, drawn by the melody. Her voice was sunlight breaking through storm clouds, warming the cold that gripped him. He opened his eyes, meeting hers, eyes that held no judgment, only care. "Who are you?" he rasped, his voice weak but steady. Amara's cheeks warmed, her song faltering. "I'm Amara," she said, her words shy but sure. "I found you. I couldn't leave you, not when the forest brought you to me." Obi's lips curved, a faint smile that lit his face like dawn. "Amara," he echoed, as if tasting her name. "Thank you." Days passed, and Obi grew stronger under Neka's care, his wounds healing with the forest's magic. Amara stayed close, bringing him water, sharing stories of Idume's stars and her own quiet dreams. Obi listened, captivated, not just by her beauty, but by her heart, which shone brighter than any jade. He told her of his home, of a village that loved him but expected too much, and of a brother whose shadow had grown too dark. "I trusted him," he said one night, his voice heavy with betrayal. "But he chose power over blood." Amara's hand brushed his, a fleeting touch that sent warmth through them both. "You're not alone anymore," she said, her eyes locking with his. "Not here." Obi's heart stirred, a song waking within him. He saw her, truly saw her, not as a girl of the forest, but as a star, radiant and unbreakable. Under the flicker of the fire, their fingers intertwined, a silent promise forming between them. The forest hummed, its spirits watching, as two souls found each other in the shadows. Outside Idume, Kelechi strode toward the palace, the jade circle hidden in his agbada, his heart pounding with triumph and guilt. He'd won, he told himself, but the forest's silence followed him, a whisper of judgment he couldn't shake. Naneka watched Amara and Obi from the doorway, her smile soft but knowing. "The forest weaves hearts as it weaves roots," she said, her voice a prophecy. "Your paths are one now." By the stream, under a sky ablaze with stars, Amara and Obi stood side by side, the moonlight painting them in silver. Her song rose again, and he joined her, their voices blending like rivers meeting the sea. The forest sighed, its secrets safe, as love took root where pain had once reigned. The village of Idume shimmered under the noon sun, its heart ablaze with the promise of a new era. The palace of King Ise stood proud, its red clay walls adorned with kente banners that danced in the breeze, their colors a hymn to the ancestors. The courtyard bloomed with muong flowers, their golden petals carpeting the earth, while the air thrummed with the beat of talking drums, calling all to witness the crowning of a king. Women in vibrant jail head wraps sang praises, their voices weaving through the crowd, and men in flowing agbada robes poured libations of palm wine, the sweet scent mingling with roasted yam and sizzling egusi stew. Idume was alive, its pulse quickened by hope, yet beneath the celebration lay a shadow of unease. Kelechi Okoye stood at the heart of the great hall, his chest puffed with triumph, the jade circle clutched in his hand. His agbada, embroidered with gold, gleamed like a warrior's armor, and his eyes burned with a fire that dared the world to challenge him. The crowd, elders, nobles, villagers, watched in awe, their murmurs a tide of admiration. "He found the circle," they whispered. "The ancestors have chosen." Yet Kelechi's heart was not at peace. The jade, once radiant in Obi's grasp, now felt cold, its light dimmed, as if it knew the blood that stained his hands. King Ise sat upon a stool beside the throne, his face a mask of pride and sorrow. He had aged in these 7 days, his silver hair stark against his dark skin, his eyes searching the hall for a son who had not returned. Obi, his gentle Obi, was lost to the forest, or so Kelechi claimed, his voice heavy with feigned grief when he'd returned alone. Ise's heart ached, but duty bound him. He raised his staff, silencing the drums, and nodded to the high priest. "Begin," he said, his voice steady but hollow. The priest poured palm wine onto the earth, chanting to the ancestors, and the crowd stilled, their breaths held. Kelechi stepped forward, his head high, the jade circle raised like a trophy. "I claim the throne," he declared, his voice ringing through the hall. "By the will of Chai, I am your king." He approached the throne, a seat of ebony carved with leopards and stars, draped in kente that shimmered like a river. The crowd cheered, but as Kelechi lowered himself, a pulse of light flared from the throne, sharp and blinding. He gasped, stumbling back, his skin stinging as if kissed by fire. The jade circle slipped from his hand, clattering to the floor, its glow gone. Silence gripped the hall, thick and heavy, as every eye widened in shock. "What is this?" Ez demanded, rising, his staff trembling in his grip. "Why does the throne reject you?" Kelechi's face paled, his arrogance faltering. I don't know," he stammered, his hands fumbling for the circle. He tried again, forcing himself onto the seat, but the light surged, hotter now, and he cried out, falling to his knees. The crowd gasped, whispers erupting like wildfire. "The ancestors are angry! He is not the one!" From the hall's shadows stepped Omenuko, the seer, his presence a storm breaking over Idume. His patched robes swayed, and his staff tapped the ground, each strike a heartbeat of truth. His eyes, deep as the night sky, fixed on Kelechi, and the prince shrank under their weight. "The throne knows," Omenuko said, his voice low but resonant, like thunder rolling from the earth. "It knows a heart that betrays its own blood." Kelechi's breath hitched, his hands shaking. "What are you saying?" he snapped, but his voice cracked, betraying his fear. Omenuko raised his staff, and the air hummed, the ancestor's presence palpable. "Speak, Kelechi Okoye," he commanded, his words weaving a spell no lie could escape. "Tell Idume what you did to your brother, to Obi, whose chi still shines." The crowd froze, their eyes darting between Kelechi and the seer. Eze leaned forward, his face a mask of dread. Kelechi tried to stand, to deny, but his knees buckled, and words spilled from him. Unbidden, raw. I struck him," he choked, tears streaming down his face. "In the forest, I took the circle. He was going to take everything. Idume, the throne, all I ever wanted. I did it for us, for our legacy." A cry tore from Eze, sharp with anguish. "My son?" he whispered, clutching his chest. "You raised your hand against your twin?" The crowd roared, their voices a tide of fury. "Traitor! Betrayer!" And Kelechi cowered, his pride shattered like clay. Omenuko's gaze softened, but his voice held firm. "Yet the ancestors are merciful," he said. "Obi lives, Eze. He walks with a light brighter than any circle, and he comes now to claim what is his." As if summoned by fate, the hall's doors swung open, and Obi stepped into the light, his agbada torn, but his stride steady. Beside him walked Amara, her beauty a quiet radiance, her eyes fierce with love and resolve. The crowd gasped, their anger giving way to wonder, for Amara was no longer the shadow they'd whispered of. She was a star, her presence commanding reverence. Ifeoma, standing among the villagers, froze, her hands flying to her mouth as she recognized her daughter. "Obi!" Eze cried, rushing forward, his arms enveloping his son. Tears glistened in his eyes as he held him, then turned to Amara, his voice trembling. "And you, who are you, child? Who brings my son home?" Amara met his gaze, her voice soft, but clear. "I am Amara Nwosu," she said, "and I found him in the forest, where the spirits led me to save him." The crowd murmured, their eyes wide, but Ifeoma pushed through, her face a storm of guilt and awe. "Amara?" she whispered, her voice breaking. "My daughter?" Ada, Ngozi, and Ezine followed, their faces pale, Ada's lips tight with shame, Ngozi's eyes averted, Ezine's brimming with tears. Amara's heart clenched, memories of pain flooding back, but she stood tall, Obi's hand brushing hers, a silent strength. "You cast me out, Mama," she said, her voice steady but laced with sorrow. "You called me a curse, and I believed it. But I am not your shame. I am my own light. I forgive you, not for you, but for me." Ifeoma sobbed, falling to her knees. "I was wrong, my child," she wept. "I was so wrong. I let fear steal my love." Ada hesitated, then knelt, her voice barely audible. "We were cruel. Forgive us." Ngozi nodded, her bravado gone, and Ezine reached for Amara's hand, her touch trembling. Amara's eyes softened, and she nodded, her heart lighter than it had ever been. Omenuko stepped forward, raising the true jade circle, handed to him by Obi, its glow restored. "This belongs to the heart that honors Idume," he said, placing it in Obi's hands. "The throne awaits." Eze turned to Kelechi, his face etched with pain. "You are my son," he said, but your actions have broken our bond. Live among the people, not as a prince, but as one who must earn trust anew." Kelechi bowed his head, silent, and left the hall, his shadow long and heavy. The drums beat again, a new rhythm, and Obi ascended the throne, the jade circle gleaming on his wrist. The crowd cheered, their voices a river of joy, but his eyes sought Amara. He rose, crossing to her, and before all Idume, he took her hands. "Amara," he said, his voice a vow, "you are my light, my song, my home. Will you stand with me, not just as my queen, but as my heart?" Tears shimmered in Amara's eyes, her smile brighter than the sun. "Yes," she whispered, "always." The crowd erupted, their cheers shaking the hall, as Obi drew her close, their foreheads touching under the ancestors' gaze. Beyond the village, in the forest of Idume, Nneka stood by her hut, her form fading into the mist. She was no mere woman, but a guardian of the wild, her spirit woven into the roots of the land. "Go, my children," she murmured, her voice a breeze through the Atamfa blooms. "Shine." That night, under a sky ablaze with stars, Obi and Amara stood in the courtyard, hands entwined, the moonlight their crown. Idume sang, its heart whole, and their love, a flame born in shadows, promised to burn forever. The village of Idume shimmered under the noon sun, its heart ablaze with the promise of a new era. The palace of King Ise stood proud, its red clay walls adorned with kente banners that danced in the breeze, their colors a hymn to the ancestors. The courtyard bloomed with muong flowers, their golden petals carpeting the earth, while the air thrummed with the beat of talking drums, calling all to witness the crowning of a king. Women in vibrant jail head wraps sang praises, their voices weaving through the crowd, and men in flowing agbada robes poured libations of palm wine, the sweet scent mingling with roasted yam and sizzling egusi stew. Idume was alive, its pulse quickened by hope, yet beneath the celebration lay a shadow of unease. Kelechi Okoye stood at the heart of the great hall, his chest puffed with triumph, the jade circle clutched in his hand. His agbada, embroidered with gold, gleamed like a warrior's armor, and his eyes burned with a fire that dared the world to challenge him. The crowd, elders, nobles, villagers, watched in awe, their murmurs a tide of admiration. "He found the circle," they whispered. "The ancestors have chosen." Yet Kelechi's heart was not at peace. The jade, once radiant in Obi's grasp, now felt cold, its light dimmed, as if it knew the blood that stained his hands. King Ise sat upon a stool beside the throne, his face a mask of pride and sorrow. He had aged in these 7 days, his silver hair stark against his dark skin, his eyes searching the hall for a son who had not returned. Obi, his gentle Obi, was lost to the forest. Or so Kelechi claimed, his voice heavy with feigned grief when he'd returned alone. Ise's heart ached, but duty bound him. He raised his staff, silencing the drums, and nodded to the high priest. "Begin," he said, his voice steady but hollow. The priest poured palm wine onto the earth, chanting to the ancestors, and the crowd stilled, their breaths held. Kelechi stepped forward, his head high, the jade circle raised like a trophy. "I claim the throne," he declared, his voice ringing through the hall. by the will of Chi, I am your king." He approached the throne, a seat of ebony, carved with leopards and stars, draped in kente that shimmered like a river. The crowd cheered, but as Kelechi lowered himself, a pulse of light flared from the throne, sharp and blinding. He gasped, stumbling back, his skin stinging as if kissed by fire. The jade circle slipped from his hand, clattering to the floor, its glow gone. Silence gripped the hall, thick and heavy, as every eye widened in shock. "What is this?" Eze demanded, rising, his staff trembling in his grip. "Why does the throne reject you?" Kelechi's face paled, his arrogance faltering. I don't know," he stammered, his hands fumbling for the circle. He tried again, forcing himself onto the seat, but the light surged, hotter now, and he cried out, falling to his knees. The crowd gasped, whispers erupting like wildfire. "The ancestors are angry! He is not the one!" From the hall's shadows stepped Omenuko, the seer, his presence a storm breaking over Idume. His patched robes swayed, and his staff tapped the ground, each strike a heartbeat of truth. His eyes, deep as the night sky, fixed on Kelechi, and the prince shrank under their weight. "The throne knows," Omenuko said, his voice low but resonant, like thunder rolling from the earth. "It knows a heart that betrays its own blood." Kelechi's breath hitched, his hands shaking. "What are you saying?" he snapped, but his voice cracked, betraying his fear. Omenuko raised his staff, and the air hummed, the ancestor's presence palpable. "Speak, Kelechi Okoye," he commanded, his words weaving a spell no lie could escape. "Tell Idume what you did to your brother, to Obi, whose chi still shines." The crowd froze, their eyes darting between Kelechi and the seer. Eze leaned forward, his face a mask of dread. Kelechi tried to stand, to deny, but his knees buckled, and words spilled from him, unbidden, raw. I struck him," he choked, tears streaming down his face. "In the forest. I took the circle. He was going to take everything. Idume, the throne, all I ever wanted. I did it for us, for our legacy." A cry tore from Ise, sharp with anguish. "My son?" he whispered, clutching his chest. "You raised your hand against your twin?" The crowd roared, their voices a tide of fury. "Traitor! Betrayer!" And Kelechi cowered, his pride shattered like clay. Omenuko's gaze softened, but his voice held firm. "Yet the ancestors are merciful," he said. "Obi lives, Eze. He walks with a light brighter than any circle. And he comes now to claim what is his." As if summoned by fate, the hall's doors swung open, and Obi stepped into the light, his agbada torn but his stride steady. Beside him walked Amara, her beauty a quiet radiance, her eyes fierce with love and resolve. The crowd gasped, their anger giving way to wonder, for Amara was no longer the shadow they'd whispered of. She was a star, her presence commanding reverence. Ifeoma, standing among the villagers, froze, her hands flying to her mouth as she recognized her daughter. "Obi!" Eze cried, rushing forward, his arms enveloping his son. Tears glistened in his eyes as he held him, then turned to Amara, his voice trembling. "And you? Who are you, child? Who brings my son home?" Amara met his gaze, her voice soft but clear. "I am Amara Nwosu," she said, "and I found him in the forest, where the spirits led me to save him." The crowd murmured, their eyes wide, but Ifeoma pushed through, her face a storm of guilt and awe. "Amara?" she whispered, her voice breaking. "My daughter?" Ada, Ngozi, and Ezine followed, their faces pale. Ada's lips tight with shame, Ngozi's eyes averted, Ezine's brimming with tears. Amara's heart clenched, memories of pain flooding back, but she stood tall, Obi's hand brushing hers, a silent strength. "You cast me out, Mama," she said, her voice steady but laced with sorrow. "You called me a curse, and I believed it. But I am not your shame, I am my own light. I forgive you, not for you, but for me." Ifeoma sobbed, falling to her knees. "I was wrong, my child," she wept. "I was so wrong. I let fear steal my love." Ada hesitated, then knelt, her voice barely audible. "We were cruel. Forgive us." Ngozi nodded, her bravado gone, and Ezine reached for Amara's hand, her touch trembling. Amara's eyes softened, and she nodded, her heart lighter than it had ever been. Omenuko stepped forward, raising the true jade circle, handed to him by Obi, its glow restored. "This belongs to the heart that honors Idume," he said, placing it in Obi's hands. "The throne awaits." Eze turned to Kelechi, his face etched with pain. "You are my son," he said, "but your actions have broken our bond. Live among the people, not as a prince, but as one who must earn trust anew." Kelechi bowed his head, silent, and left the hall, his shadow long and heavy. The drums beat again, a new rhythm, and Obi ascended the throne, the jade circle gleaming on his wrist. The crowd cheered, their voices a river of joy, but his eyes sought Amara. He rose, crossing to her, and before all Idume, he took her hands. "Amara," he said, his voice a vow, "you are my light, my song, my home. Will you stand with me, not just as my queen, but as my heart?" Tears shimmered in Amara's eyes, her smile brighter than the sun. "Yes," she whispered, "always." The crowd erupted, their cheers shaking the hall, as Obi drew her close, their foreheads touching under the ancestors' gaze. Beyond the village, in the forest of Idume, Neka stood by her hut, her form fading into the mist. She was no mere woman, but a guardian of the wild, her spirit woven into the roots of the land. "Go, my children," she murmured, her voice a breeze through the Atamfa blooms. "Shine." That night, under a sky ablaze with stars, Obi and Amara stood in the courtyard, hands entwined, the moonlight their crown. Idume sang, its heart whole, and their love, a flame born in shadows, promised to burn forever.